Hello everyone! Today I want to tell you a story that has been told for many years about a great hero of Vietnam. His name is Saint Giong. Saint Giong is one of the most sacred and heroic legends of Vietnam. The story tells about the magical power of love for the country and the strong courage to protect the land from enemies. When Giong was 3 years old, he could not talk or smile. But one day, he suddenly grew into a giant hero. He rode a magical iron horse, pulled up bamboo trees, and bravely defeated the enemy to protect his homeland. The story of Saint Giong is not only a legend, but also a symbol of bravery, strength, and the pride of the Vietnamese people. Long ago, during the reign of the 6th King Hung, there lived a woman named Mary in the peaceful Phu Dong village. She was a kind and virtuous woman, yet fate had left her lonely in her twilight years, with no child to share her days. One morning, as the white mist still clung to the eggplant fields, Mary went out to tend her crops and was astonished to find a colossal footprint crushing several rows of plants. The footprint was extraordinarily large, far greater than any mortal foot. With a mixture of curiosity and reverence, she placed her own slender foot into the mark to measure it. In that instant, a strange tremor ran down her spine, and a warmth spread throughout her body. Not long after, Mary found she was with child. After 12 months of a mysterious pregnancy, she gave birth to a handsome boy and named him Saint Giong. Strangely, though Giong was healthy and plump, he remained silent even at 3 years old. He could not speak, could not smile, and could not walk. He spent his days lying on his back, asking for food, his eyes always gazing into the distance, as if waiting for something monumental. At that time, the shadow of war suddenly fell upon the south. From the north, the cruel Lord An led an invading army that swept across the land like a flood. Wherever they went, homes were destroyed, and the cries of the people shook the heavens. King Hung led his armies into battle many times, but the enemy's strength was overwhelming, and his forces fell into despair. In his deep anxiety, King Hung ordered the royal messenger to travel throughout the kingdom, beating drums and gongs to search for heroes with the talent to save the nation from ruin. One day, the royal messenger arrived at Phu Dong village. The sound of his announcement echoed through the village lanes, reaching the small house where Saint Giong lay. Hearing the call and looking at her silent son, Mary felt both love and sorrow. She jokingly said, "Oh my child, you are so slow to walk and talk. When will you ever be able to fight the invaders for the king?" In that very moment, a miracle occurred. Saint Giong suddenly sat up, his eyes flashing like lightning, and he spoke his first words in a voice as thunderous as a storm. "Mother, please invite the royal messenger in here for me." In the quiet Phu Dong village, something miraculous was unfolding. A humble thatched cottage suddenly pulsed with a divine light, an aura never before seen. Inside, Mary stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Tears of disbelief welled in her eyes as her son, who had been silent for 3 long years, finally spoke. But this wasn't the simple babble of a toddler. It was a voice of immense power, a voice that boomed like thunder from a clear sky, shaking the very foundations of their small home. Overwhelmed with a mix of fear and wonder, Mary rushed out onto the village path, her voice trembling as she called for her neighbors and for the royal messenger, who happened to be passing through. The messenger, drawn by the commotion, entered the small dwelling. His eyes fell upon the toddler, still lying peacefully in his cradle. A look of deep skepticism crossed the official's face. How could a child this small be the source of such a stir? But then, the toddler, known as Saint Giong, opened his eyes and fixed the messenger with a gaze of such incredible majesty that all doubt evaporated. replaced instantly by profound awe. "Return to King Hung at once," Saint Giong commanded, his voice unwavering and filled with an authority that defied his size. "Tell him to forge for me an iron horse, an iron sword, a suit of iron armor, and an iron helmet. With these, I shall shatter the invaders and restore peace to our sacred land." The sheer force of his words was undeniable. The messenger, compelled by a power he couldn't comprehend, bowed in deep reverence before scrambling from the cottage. He mounted his horse and galloped back towards the capital with breathless speed, the child's powerful words echoing in his mind. When the messenger arrived at the palace and relayed the extraordinary event, King Hung was overjoyed. He recognized this as a sign from the heavens, a divine savior, sent to deliver his people. Without a moment's hesitation, the king issued a royal decree. He summoned the finest blacksmiths from every corner of the realm and commanded that every last ounce of iron be brought from the royal treasuries. A great sense of purpose swept through the kingdom. Day and night, the rhythmic clang of hammers on anvils echoed through the land. The fires of the forges in the legendary villages of Goldfield and Fortune burned so brightly they lit up the night sky, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. As the blacksmiths toiled, the legendary equipment began to take shape. The iron horse, the sword, the armor, and the helmet grew to an immense size, becoming so massive and heavy that it was said even hundreds of the strongest soldiers couldn't budge them an inch. Each strike of the hammer was more than just the shaping of metal. It carried the collective hope of a nation on the brink. They were forging not just weapons of war, but the very destiny of a people, preparing to rise and face the dark shadow of Lord and AS, invading armies. The entire kingdom held its breath, its faith placed in a 3-year-old boy, and the impossible promise of an iron warrior. The stage was set, the weapons were being forged, and a legend was about to be born in fire and steel. The heavy, rhythmic thumping of the royal guard echoed through every path, leading to Pudong village. The capital's finest blacksmiths had completed the forging of the massive iron horse, the armor, the rod, and the helmet, exactly as the 3-year-old boy had commanded. As the silhouette of the royal messenger and his entourage appeared at the village gates, Mary ran home, her breath shallow with terror. She looked at her son, who had lain in silence for 3 long years. Now facing a responsibility as heavy as a mountain, she cried out, "My son!" The business of the king and the matters of war are no game. The soldiers are gathering like a storm at the field, their blades gleaming. What are we to do? In that pivotal moment, a miracle unfolded. Saint Giong was no longer the silent infant in the cradle. He stood up abruptly, his eyes shining like the morning star, his voice booming like rolling thunder. "Mother, do not worry about the invaders, but you must feed me. I need strength to carry the weight of the mountains and rivers." Half joyful and half fearing, Mary rushed to cook rice. Yet, something extraordinary happened. No matter how many pots of rice she prepared, Saint Giong finished them in an instant. With every meal, his stature expanded. Before long, their humble cottage became too small for his rapidly growing frame, which shot up as if fueled by the wind itself. The news spread like wildfire through Pudong village. The villagers realized that this was indeed the savior, sent by the heavens. Without a word of command, the people flocked to Mary's yard, carrying baskets of rice, sweet potatoes, leading buffaloes, and bringing jars of wine and fruit. They whispered to one another, "No matter how much Giong eats, we shall provide as long as he saves our people." The entire village united, their hearts burning bright day and night. Yet no matter how much food was brought, Saint Giong consumed it all and still asked for more. His body was now towering, his shoulders as broad as cliff faces, and his muscles as sturdy as ancient ironwood trees. Having exhausted the village's granaries, Saint Giong spoke again. "Mother, find me cloth to wear." The elders and women of the village hurriedly gathered their finest silks. Great bolts of fabric, yards long, were brought to fashion garments for the hero. However, the strange phenomenon continued. As soon as the cloth was cut and the robes sewn, they became too tight. The seams snapped under the pressure of Giong's expanding muscles. The villagers had to gather coarse cloth and oak-dyed fabrics from neighbouring villages, stitching them together into giant cloaks. By now, Saint Giong had truly become a colossal warrior, embodying the collective strength of his community and the sacred spirit of the land. This miraculous transformation was a sight to behold. Giong, once a silent child, now stood as a giant. His presence alone, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. He was a hero, not just born of divine will, but nurtured and grown by the very people he was destined to protect. Each grain of rice, each thread of cloth, was a contribution to his power, a testament to the village's unwavering faith. As he outgrew his home, then his village's resources, it became clear that Giong was no ordinary man. He was the living embodiment of a nation's will to survive, a hero whose strength was drawn from the unity and sacrifice of his people. The royal messenger, who had waited patiently, watched in awe. The boy he had met was now a formidable giant, ready for the implements of war he had brought. He stepped forward and presented the iron horse, the gleaming armor, the heavy rod, and the imposing helmet. Without a moment's hesitation, Saint Giong reached out and donned the armor. It fit him perfectly, as if it had been forged for his new, colossal form. He grasped the iron rod, its weight feeling like a mere twig in his powerful hand. Then, with a single fluid motion, he leapt onto the back of the iron horse. The horse, as if animated by the same divine spirit, let out a thunderous neigh and spewed fire from its nostrils. Its metallic hide gleaming under the sun, Saint Giong, now fully armed and mounted, was a terrifying and magnificent sight. He was the perfect warrior, a fusion of human will and heavenly power. He turned to his mother and the gathered villagers, his voice clear and resolute, a promise of deliverance. The time for waiting was over. The time to fight had come. With a final farewell, he spurred the iron horse, which galloped away like a whirlwind, heading straight for the battlefield where the enemy awaited. The legend of Saint Giong was about to be written in fire and steel. From the village entrance, the clang of gongs and drums announced the arrival of King Hung's soldiers, escorting precious iron treasures to Pudong village. Inside a small cottage, a miraculous event was unfolding. The boy Giong had grown so tall so fast that his head was now pushing against the roof, making the bamboo walls groan and splinter. His mother, Mary, watched her son, her heart a whirlwind of joy and fear. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the boy who was once silent, now transformed into a figure of divine proportions. The courtyard buzzed with a hushed awe as the soldiers laid down their delivery. Gleaming iron armor, a sturdy iron helmet, a massive iron sword, and an iron horse that weighed thousands of pounds. The villagers held their breath, their eyes wide with disbelief. Then, Giong stepped out of the cottage. The very ground seemed to tremble with each step he took. He took a deep breath and performed a long, powerful stretch. A sound like rolling thunder echoed as his bones cracked and popped. And in that single, breathtaking moment, he grew into a heroic giant, over 10 fathoms tall, majestic and formidable. He let out a roar that shook the heavens. "I am the heavenly general." Miles away, at Goldfield and Fortune, the enemy forces heard that cry, and felt a chill of pure terror run down their spines. After bowing deeply to his mother and the villagers, in a gesture of profound gratitude, Giong prepared for battle. He donned the heavy iron armor, secured the helmet on his head, and picked up the gleaming sword, spinning it so fast it created powerful whirlwinds. With a single fluid motion, he leaped onto the back of the iron horse. The metal steed suddenly quivered to life. It let out a long, piercing neigh and breathed out a torrent of bright red fire that scorched the very horizon. Giong spurred the horse forward. With each thunderous leap, the iron steed covered dozens of poles in distance, charging like a meteor straight toward the encampments of the invading Lord An. Lord An watched in horror from his command post as a flaming deity on a fire-breathing horse descended upon his army. The battle that followed was a storm of steel and fire in the foothills of the mountains. Wherever Giong's sword flashed, the enemy soldiers felt like harvested grain. The iron horse spewed fire, incinerating the enemy forts and the forests where the invaders tried to hide, creating a scene of epic, terrifying grandeur. The fighting was so intense, the force of his blows so immense, that his iron sword suddenly snapped in two against the heavy armor of an enemy general. But Giong did not hesitate for even a second. Without missing a beat, he reached down, his giant hand closing around a clump of ivory bamboo growing by the roadside. With a mighty heave, he uprooted it, roots and all, instantly fashioning a new, miraculous weapon. In his divine hands, the flexible bamboo became more lethal than any man-made blade. He wielded it with incredible speed and power, sweeping through the ranks of Lord An's soldiers. The invaders, already paralyzed with dread at the sight of the giant general, could do nothing but fall before the relentless, powerful strikes of the bamboo whip. The final battle was a storm of divine fury. Unfolding under a sky painted with the colors of judgment, Lord An, the would-be conqueror who boasted he could swallow the entire kingdom, was now just a trembling man before the young celestial general. His iron sword, once a symbol of his power, shattered into 1,000 pieces. In that moment, Saint Giong didn't falter. He reached down and tore up entire groves of bamboo from the roadside. The humble stalks became divine whips in his hands, lashing out with the force of a hurricane, each strike a clap of thunder. The supple, resilient bamboo moved with the hero's will, a green and golden storm that swept through the enemy ranks. The invaders, who had fought so desperately to hold their ground, were now scattered like leaves in the wind. Their terrified screams were lost in the whistling gale and the deafening roar of the iron horse. With one final decisive blow, Saint Giong struck down Lord An. The tyrant's dark ambitions were extinguished, buried forever beneath the very soil he tried to conquer. Seeing their leader fall, the last remnants of the invading army lost all heart. Their spirits broken, they dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, begging for mercy. At that moment, King Hong's soldiers and the people of Pudong village surged forward like a tidal wave. They captured the survivors and secured the kingdom's freedom, all in a single morning. The land was finally cleansed, but the young hero didn't linger for praise or earthly rewards. His mission complete, he turned his iron horse and galloped towards the base of Mount Sok. As he reached the misty summit, he paused, casting one last loving look over the homeland he had saved. It was a silent farewell. He dismounted and with a quiet reverence placed his heavy iron armor and polished helmet upon the ancient rocks. Then, in a final act of celestial grace, both Saint Giong and his loyal steed rose into the sky. They merged with the 5-colored clouds, ascending into the brilliant light of the northern sky until they vanished from sight. To honor his immeasurable sacrifice, King Hong bestowed upon him the title Fudong Heavenly King, and ordered a temple to be built in his home village. But the story doesn't end there. The marks of that epic battle are still etched into the landscape today, a permanent reminder of his divine power. The chain of circular ponds that stretch from Goldfield all the way to Mount Sock are said to be the footprints left by his iron horse during its thunderous charge. The forest that was once scorched by the horse's fiery breath is now called Ashbourne, a living memory of the flames that consumed the invaders, and the bamboo, the very stalks Giong wielded as weapons, were forever changed. Singed by the horse's fire, their colour transformed from vibrant green to a permanent golden yellow, speckled with dark burn marks. To this day, they grow in the region and are known as ivory bamboo. Saint Giong didn't die, he became immortal. He is the spirit of the mountains and rivers, an eternal symbol of the nation's unyielding strength and its unbreakable will to be free. This legend is more than just a story. It's a testament to the idea that heroes can rise from anywhere, and that the spirit of a nation, when kindled, can perform miracles. Thank you for joining us on this journey into myth and history. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales from around the world. We'll see you next time.